wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We will get started in just a few seconds here. We're going to let folks file on in from the waiting room, and we are live on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. So good evening, and thanks for being with us for the next hour. Best-selling author Mike Lupica is here to discuss his latest book, Robert B. Parker's Payback, and he's in conversation with the one and only James Patterson.
Wow.
Wow is right. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm the Community Outreach Librarian and Head of Technical Services at the Tewksbury Public Library. Before I disappear, just wanted to make a few quick housekeeping points. First, I just want to thank everyone who made this event possible. This is a collaboration between numerous north of Boston libraries, including Andover, Billerica, Boxford, Dracut, Georgetown, Haverhill, Ipswich, Merrimac, Middleton, Newburyport, Salisbury, Tewksbury, Tyngsborough, West Newbury, and Wilmington. I also want to thank, wow, exactly. Also want to thank Wellesley Books for being our bookstore partner, and for Katie McGee from Penguin Random House for her coordination. Second, this event is currently being live streamed on the Tewksbury Public Library's Facebook page. Please give the video a like and share it with your friends. Third, all of tonight's Zoom viewers will be receiving a feedback survey from me via email tomorrow. So please take a few moments and let us know what you thought of tonight's event. Also in that feedback survey will be a link to purchase an autographed copy of Mike's latest book, Payback, from Wellesley Books, and 10% of each sale will benefit the participating libraries. And finally, to set expectations, I anticipate this event lasting approximately an hour. Mike and James will have a discussion, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So viewers should type their questions into the Q&A and the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible at the end of the program. All right, so let me introduce James and then Mike. And let me just say, this is a career highlight for me to get to introduce James Patterson. This doesn't happen every day. James Patterson is the world's best-selling author and most trusted storyteller. He has created many enduring fictional characters and series, including Alex Cross, The Women's Murder Club, Michael Bennett, Maximum Ride, Middle School, and iFunny. Among his notable literary collaborations are the Max Einstein series, produced in partnership with the Albert Einstein Estate, as well as The President is Missing with President Bill Clinton. And I'm personally looking forward to The President's Daughter with Bill Clinton coming out in a couple of weeks. James's writing career is characterized by a single mission to prove that there is no such thing as a person who doesn't like to read, only people who haven't found the right book. He's given over 3 million books to school kids in the military, donated more than $70 million to support education, and endowed over 5,000 college scholarships for teachers. He's also the recipient of an Edgar Award and 6 Emmy Awards. Mike Lupica, meanwhile, is a prominent sports journalist, one of the preeminent sports journalists in America, and he's the New York Times best-selling author of more than 40 works of fiction and nonfiction. He is a National Sports Media Hall of Famer and a longtime columnist for the New York Daily News and MLB.com. He was a panelist and host of ESPN Sports Reporters Talk Show, and he now co-hosts the Sports Reporters podcast with Mitch Albom. He was a longtime friend to Robert B. Parker, and he was selected by the Parker estate to continue the Sonny Randell and the Jesse Stone series. And something I just learned about 5 minutes ago is that Mike and James collaborated on a book called The Horsewomen, which is being published this fall. And I suspect we'll learn a little bit more about that book later in the evening. So let's give a big virtual round of applause to Mike Lupica and James Patterson for joining us tonight. And gentlemen, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Definitely. I have to start with, are Taylor and Hannah listening?
Taylor is listening. Hannah is not listening because, Jim, after she graduated, it was so stressful for her. She had to go. She and her friends went on vacation.
Right. Well, Taylor, I apologize up front for what is about to happen.
Oh, good. Yeah, sure, fine. Yeah.
Okay. Any last words before we start?
No.
Isn't that a great line? I love that one. Okay. Mike, can I call you Mike?
Well, as opposed to what?
As you well know, when we go on tour, the TV and radio hosts, they rarely have read the book, our book, and then they get kind of irritated that their producers have booked us. So they'll usually start by saying something like, "So, Mike, tell us about your new novel, Payback." Am I right?
No, what they usually do with me is, Mike, we want to talk about whatever city it is. We want to talk about the White Sox or the Dodgers or the Rangers, but we'll get to your book eventually, which sometimes happens with about a minute to go in the interview.
So, Mike, tell us about your new novel, Payback.
Well, Jim, it is a
No, actually, I love Payback.
You don't really want to know that, do you?
No. That was a joke. You missed a joke. I loved Payback. And my opinion is that your Sonny Randall is better than Robert Parker's Sonny Randall. I know that's sacrilegious, but I love Robert Parker. But tell us about your national bestseller, Payback, a little bit.
Do you really want to know now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
they want to know. I want to know.
Well, you know this, but I'll tell the people listening tonight and watching us, it was quite random how I got to write Sonny Randall novels. I was listening to a book on tape on a trip to Vermont. I called Esther Newberg, my agent, who is the executor of the Parker Literary Estate. And I said, they kept Spencer going. They kept Jesse Stone going. They kept the Westerns going. How come nobody is writing Sonny Randalls? And she said, I'll find out. She called me back and she said, Ivan Held, the big boss at Putnam, wants you to write a sample chapter. And I said, no, I wasn't pitching myself to do this. I was just curious. She said, shut up and write the chapter, which I did. And that chapter that I wrote the next morning essentially became the first chapter of my first Sonny Randall. This is number 3. You know this. It has been such a blast writing this character and having all of these characters, on my laptop screen now.
Yeah, and I do think you do a great job. Gambling plays a part in the story, big part. How do you know so much about gambling?
I don't. I had to learn a lot about
gambler.
No, I'm not. Taylor, my wife would tell you when we've been in places where we could gamble. The blackjack table is not my friend, Jim. It is not my friend because I'm not really concentrating on the cards. I'm looking around the table. I'm experiencing the whole vibe of being there. So I had to have a friend of mine give me enough poker stuff that I felt like I was writing it in an informed way. And the other subplot, as you know, in this book is hedge funds. I know as much about hedge funds as I do about being an astronaut, but I had a very good friend, John.
The gambling stuff is very convincing. And, I know that with Mike, you name any sports figure, let's say gentleman Jim Lomborg from the Red Sox way up back. And Mike will say, let me tell you my favorite Jim Lomborg story, that he's got 10 of them. So tell us one of your favorite sports gambling stories.
Oh, okay. Well, Jim Patterson knows this story because we actually talked about it the other day on the golf course. Can I tell 2? I'll tell 2. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Paul Hornung was a friend. The late Paul Hornung was a friend of mine, and Paul once got suspended for a year from the National Football League for betting on games. Okay. And he liked to bet. And one year, BC was playing Notre Dame in football, and he and Terry Hanratty came up for a pregame luncheon in the run-up to the game. And Terry got up and he gave this beautiful talk about how these are the only 2 major Catholic schools playing college football and how it's not a war. And when BC's not playing Notre Dame, he roots for them. And even on Saturday, he said, as long as Notre Dame wins by a point, I'm happy. And he turned to Hornung and he said, Paul would like him to win by 2.5. That's one of my gambling stories. Okay. But the other one was at the end of Hornung's career, he's playing with the New Orleans Saints. And there's a preseason game and Paul's not going to be playing very much. He's standing next to Tom Fears, the coach. And he might have made a slight wager on the outcome, and everything was going fine for him until a rookie punt returner took a punt return back 80 yards. At which point Hornig knows he's going to lose his bet. He's carrying a clipboard. He throws it down, and Fierce turns to him and he says, "What's the matter, Paul?" And Hornig said, "Coach, I thought I saw a clip." That's what it is. That's what it is.
All right. Now, Jesse Stone, you write the Jesse Stone novels now as well, but Jesse is also a character in Payback.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think at this stage it shouldn't be Robert Parker's. I think it ought to be Mike Lupica's. Whatever. I'm more of a Lupica, you know. But what's going on between Jesse and Sonny in Payback? Because some people like the romantic part of it, and that's a nice part of the story as well.
Yeah, you know, the last Jesse Stone that Bob Parker wrote, he had Jesse and Sonny intersect before, but you could see that in split image, he was really kind of falling in love with this relationship. And so I went back to that, and it informed what I did with them, because Sonny, through most of the books, has had an on-again, off-again relationship with her ex-husband, Richie Burke, who is a saloon keeper, but a child of the Boston mob, which makes it was always an interesting dynamic. Sonny's the daughter of a cop. He's the son of an Irish gangster named Desmond Burke. But for this book, I thought I'd done enough Richie, and I brought Jesse into it for the sheer fun of it, and because I like when they get talking to each other. I think it's a really, really fun relationship.
Mm-hmm. Now, Spencer's girlfriend, the shrink, Susan Silverman, is also a character in Payback.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that they don't want you to actually put Spencer in the Sonny Randall books. Is that?
I think I could. I think he could have a cameo.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I was just interested about whether you would if you could, and I wasn't sure if you could or not. Now, I'm not worried about spoiler alerts. We're not going to really tell the whole plot, but I wouldn't worry about it because we could tell you the whole plot, and it would still be it would still be worth reading Payback because the dialogue is so good. Now, obviously, in your newspaper days, you didn't have to write a lot of great dialogue. But what's the secret? Is it a family thing, talking around the table? Why are you so good with dialogue?
Well, you know this because you are. It's just listening. It's, Dan Jenkins used to talk about what he called overheards. He used to write down overheards. He used to pick out snippets of conversation. And you know this, if it doesn't sound real, nobody's going to buy the rest of the book. And I love writing dialogue. You knew Elmore Leonard. He was a dear friend of mine, and he always used to talk about how he'd get a bunch of characters, get them in a room, start them talking, and then hope that an interesting book developed. Because the one thing that Elmore Leonard said about dialogue, he said, people will skip other parts of books sometimes. Nobody ever skips dialogue. And I just, this is true. It's what drives everything.
Well, one of Elmore Leonard's thing, one thing he always said is how he all of a sudden got famous and versus his early books. And he said, I stopped writing the parts that people skim. Here's a curiosity, though, for me, a little head scratcher, because I've spent some time with you, and the dialogue is so good in the books, but in real life, your dialogue really isn't that. No, I'm kidding. So something unfortunate happens in chapter 24. I don't think it should have happened. We've talked about this. I blame it on your editor.
No.
How do you feel? How do you feel about editors? Are they a good person? Does it all over the lot?
I have
good and bad editors.
I have a fabulous editor for Sonny and Jesse named Sarah Minich. I don't know if she's listening or not. No.
My editor is listening. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, Sarah is fantastic.
All right.
But she and there's always a point in the book, and she knows this, where I get near the end of a book and I feel like I'm in a locked room, and I make these like literary 911 calls to Sarah, and we talk about things, and she helps me get out of them.
I know the feeling that Sarah has because I get those freaking calls.
Yes, you
Okay.
do. Yes.
Now, I want everybody. Here's the deal: we're going to make you guys laugh a little bit, hopefully, and then you got to go buy the autograph thing at the bookstore, because he needs the money. Now, in terms of wanting everybody to, you really should read the book. But Mike, you shamelessly populate Payback with Russian mafia,
Yeah.
Irish mafia,
Yeah.
hitmen,
Yeah.
extortionists,
Yeah.
Wall Street sleaze,
Yeah.
some of Parker's best bad guys like Tony Marcus
Oh,
and T-Bop. By the way, is that the proper pronunciation? Is it T-Bop or Ty-Bop?
you know what? I've always thought of it as Ty-Bop. I've always thought of it as Ty-Bop.
Good to know. When they were doing the movies, the Alex Cross, and they asked me about the what the pronunciation was for one of the characters, and I told them, and then they decided they weren't going to do it that way. That's the way the movies is. All right, so Robert Parker was a friend of yours.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about Parker. A great. Did he ever cook dinner for you and Taylor, or
No,
he was a food critic though, right? Yeah.
He was a foodie. He was a foodie of the first rank. I visited the famous house in Cambridge where he had one floor. His late wife Joan had another floor, and then they had a common area where they kind of got together, and it was a fabulous
marriage work. Yeah.
Yeah, he said that's why they were married as long as they were, and he was like a superhero. I see your hat tonight. Bob was a huge Red Sox fan, and there was a lot of emailing that went on between us during the baseball season. But Jim, I picked up the first Spencer, the Godwolf manuscript when I was in college in the 70s, and just loved it. And I've always felt as if when I started writing Sonny, I'd had that voice in my head for such a long time. It wasn't the first scene I ever wrote of the sample chapter that actually got into the first book. Sonny is with her friend Spike, who's like a gay superhero. And she says to him, "Do you think I'm getting older?" And he says, "This is a trap." And she said, "No." She says, "The UPS kid mammed me the other day." And Spike said, "I assume you shot him." And Jim, I swear to God, from that moment on, I just felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
That's Sonny. That's Sonny. I have one Parker story myself. When I was a kid, believe it or not, I was a kid at 26 or whatever, I won an Edgar for Best First Mystery. And Parker won for Best Mystery. And I'm shy and whatever. I should be shy now, but I shoot my mouth off. And anyway, so there were pictures after the ceremony, and I'm standing next to Parker, and I had read all of his books. And I said, I've read all of your books, and I blanked on the name of the character. He looks down at me and he goes, "Spencer, like the poet," which is, I felt like, like about 2 inches tall. Speaking of awards, you are in the Sports Writer Hall of Fame, which is pretty terrific. Now what was that like? I mean, did you wow, the Taylor clap and cheer? You guys go out was that like a cool moment?
It was a cool moment because I never thought I'd make any kind of Hall of Fame. I thought it was like Groucho Marx. So, I wouldn't get in any club that would have me as a member. And when I said to Taylor, when I found out I'd been nominated, I said, so many people will have to die for me to actually get this award. For me, Jim, for me to move up the line. And then my dear friend, my big brother, Bob Ryan of the Boston Globe, called and told me that I had gotten in, and it was actually a tremendous experience. It was a lot of fun. It was down in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I gave a speech. I think my sons, of course, were taking bets at the table. They had established an over-under number for how long Dad would speak.
How long did you speak?
I think I went 18 minutes, Jim. But here's the good thing.
Well, what the hell?
They put me in the middle of the program, so it wasn't like people thought I was yammering on at the end of the program. But yeah, it was.
You only get up there once. A sensitive question, but how did you fool the Parker family into letting them, to give you these 2 book series?
I just think, they must have felt like they lost a bet or something. But David is the one I've dealt with the most, and they have been great. And I think they've been pleased when they've seen the response.
No, I was kidding you, because I'm sure they're very happy with the books, because I think they're terrific. All right, there is an interesting phrase in the book, flying funt. Did you coin the word funt? Have you coined other words?
Well, I mean, we're doing a thing for a library. We both have a favorite expression.
Well, you also used the phrase
blankety blank.
Bunting font in the book.
Yeah. And then there's the other one with the real word in it, and that.
All right. This whole thing went over my head. I think I'm getting it now. No, I'm just kidding. Let's get back to your editor. There's a dialogue exchange in Payback. I'm a very close reader, and one of the characters says, "As you wish." And then the other character says, "It's from the Princess Bride, Buttercup." And that exchange doesn't make sense to me. "As you wish" is a rather common phrase. So who do I blame, you or your editor, or do I blame myself as a bad reader?
I don't think it would be appropriate for me to call you a bad reader. It's just a play on words, because as you wish. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Can you hold on 1 second? Sure.
Yeah, sure. We got nothing better to do here. I hope we just lost 50 people in Facebook.
No. William Goldman was my dear friend and mentor for 40 years. Can everybody see this? Is this possible to see?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. This is what was handed out to people. Okay. This is what was handed out to people at Bill's memorial service after he passed away. And it says, "As you wish, William Goldman." Okay. Because it was a famous line in The Princess Bride. Okay. So when I used it, then I threw in Buttercup, because Buttercup was the female lead of the Princess.
This is a real literary thing. Okay, that's very cool.
Okay.
How many holes in golf have you had? No, never mind.
No, go ahead. No. Let's have the hole in one. No. You want to have the hole in one conversation?
No, we don't want to. There's a character named Jalen Washington in Payback.
Yes.
Was he named after Jalen Rose, the basketball player?
No, I just think it's a cool name. Yeah. I mean, I know Jalen Rose. I
watched an ESPN thing where they went on for half an hour about that thing, about somebody, Jalen's named after Jalen Rose's, for half an hour. I couldn't believe it.
It's become kind of a more popular boy's name in the modern world.
Is it?
It's like Taylor. My wife's name is Taylor. If that was never a big name for girls back when, when she came on.
I have a character named Brooklyn. Brooklyn is a hugely popular name for
yes. Yeah.
That shocked me. I couldn't believe it. And then I see it's like in the top 15 names across the country. It must be all people living in, I don't know. I did one character and said, thank God I wasn't born in Staten Island. I don't know. Yeah, whatever. So what else are we missing here about Payback? It's a wonderful book. The dialogue is spectacular. It's got all this amazing, some Parker characters. And have you created any original bad guys yet for this thing? Well, sure you did. And then that happened. Drysdale, very bad guy.
Yes, he's a bad guy. When this book came together for me, and I didn't know it was going to happen, and we've talked about this, that the fun of doing this is when something happens in a story that you didn't know was going to happen, okay? And there's a moment where this book starts with two things. A sleazoid hedge fund guy takes Spike's restaurant because of a very bad loan deal during COVID-19. That starts the action of the book. But then her friend
And,
Lee
they trust,
Farrell
and Spike trusts this guy. That's the real
trusts him.
nasty thing about it. Yeah.
He's a regular at the restaurant. They act like they're buddies. And Spike is so desperate to save the restaurant that he signs this thing, doesn't really look at it. The guy grabs the restaurant. That starts the action of the book, because for all the times that Spike has helped out Sonny, now she's going to make things right for him. And then her friend Lee Farrell, a cop, his niece, gets beat up one night at college. And there's a moment about 100 pages in.
Now, this niece is a very disreputable character, I might say. Is she a Boston College girl?
No. Oh, no. We don't have those at Boston College.
Boston University?
I think she went to Manhattan.
Right. We'll push that.
No, I think she went to Manhattan, actually. But
or Vanderbilt, yeah.
But there's a moment, as you know, about 100 pages in, where the two stories intersect, and then the thing gets really fun after that.
All right. What have I missed here about Payback?
Well, you haven't
Great
gone
dialogue,
into the
great
thing. No. You attacked my editor because you thought I killed off the sleazy hedge fund guy too soon. Spoiler.
I didn't attack the editor. I just want to know what you think of the editor.
She's a genius.
All right. Okay. Now, if we've done Payback, we'll just do a quick thing. You have a stunningly good novel coming out in January. Amazing. You want to say anything about the Horsewomen?
I do. I mean, it's.
We'll get off of this because this is Payback night, but you know.
Wait a minute, hold on. I don't know. Can anybody see this? Oh yeah. Wait, what? What's that? Okay.
You got your thumb over your name though. Show them again.
No, I thought I had my thumb over your name.
No, it's over your name.
All right. Anyway.
And you see how much bigger it is than the thing with the Robert Parker thing? I don't know. Is that your editor? That's your editor again with that.
No, you know what? If you look at
that Robert Parker thing, it's crazy.
No, if you look at Patterson's name and my name, it looks like he's a power forward and I'm got caught in a mismatch in the low blocks, right?
You're the very crafty point guard. It's perfect.
All right, so we can talk about it. Listen, my daughter is.
No, we didn't need to talk about it. Give us one line about it. What?
A mother and daughter, show jumpers, trying to make it to the Olympics, end up competing against each other. There.
Great. But this is May, and God bless me. Okay. And this is the month.
The pollen count is about 1 million where I am. So
this is the month where everybody reads Payback. Next January, we'll do that. We'll do the other one.
You know what, Jim? Here's the thing about Sonny, and I'm so pleased that you do like Sonny. And with these books, yes, I try to write. We all try to write good stories. We try to put surprises in. But at the end of the day, you either want to hang around with Sonny Randall for 300 pages or you don't. And her dad and Richie and Jesse and Spike and even Tony Marcus. You know this because we've talked about it. Tony Marcus is so much fun to write. I almost have to, make myself not let him be in the books too much because he's just so damn fun to write.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you do a great job with the bad guys too. So so in the words of Sonny Randall, oh ho. So we're kind of at that point where I guess we can take some questions. That makes sense. Yeah, I think if people have questions. And the job of you people who are going to ask questions is to really try to stump Mike. No, like softballs, I love you. You're so terrific. No, you can do the nice things first, and then a stumper toward the end.
Well,
are we ready for questions?
We are.
Do you have any questions to the people listening?
Yeah, we're ready for questions, guys. I have about a handful, and I would encourage folks to continue to get some questions into the Q&A box. That would be great.
Sure.
This question.
And Robert, here's the thing. After we take some questions, I have some questions for Mr. Patterson, and we're going to switch roles here because I have some questions for Mr. Patterson.
All I have to do is there's a little button down here that says leave. So
that sounds great. So we'll do a few questions
I didn't come here to be grilled. I'm the griller.
Well,
Yeah.
Mike's going to turn the tables on you for a few minutes, but I'll do a few questions from the audience now. This is for Mike. Compare and contrast writing Jesse Stone versus Sonny Randall. I love both characters and your treatment of both.
Okay, Sonny is a first-person novel. It's completely told from her point of view, and again, it's a blast. It's a great voice to be able to write in. My wife Taylor is used to me now coming down and asking, what brand of jeans would she be wearing? Which store would she be shopping in? Okay, but she's kind of she's a tough guy. She's a tough guy, and she's the daughter of a cop, and she is surrounded by interesting, funny people, and she's loyal, and she's what my friend James Carville calls foxhole loyal, and that's the fun of writing her in Payback. Is again, in the other books, Spike is her wingman. Spike is like the coolest wingman you could ever possibly have. He's a restaurant owner. He can be a badass when he needs to be. And he is down and out. He has lost Spike's, a fictional restaurant over on Marshall Street in Boston. And Sonny's going to make things right with this Alex Drysdale, who's this bad hedge fund guy. And before she knows it, there's a Russian named Eddie, the former Eddie Rostov, is trying to scare her off, and away she goes. And as usual, she does not back up. She has no backup. Jesse's a darker character. I mean, Jim and I have talked about this. Jim wants him to start drinking again because his alcoholism has informed these books for a long time. But he's been sober for a fair amount of time, and this is a third person book. It's told from his point of view. The one I'm finishing editing now that'll come out in September, it's told from his deputy Molly's point of view. I bring back a badass Native American character named Wilson Cromartie, who's known as Crow, and it's a little more of a tighter narrative that way, because again with Sonny, she talks like I talk, No.
She's good company. She's really good company. No.
Well, what are you saying? Well,
well, it's obvious. Let's not confuse you and Sonny. Okay, we're really with Sonny. You're a little bit more like, the other guy, the recovering alcoholic.
Who, Jesse?
Yeah.
No, I'm more fun than that.
No, you're dark. You're. Okay. Next question.
And that last question was from Fred. So thank you, Fred. Next question for Mike again. Do you enjoy writing fiction more than sports writing? I always enjoyed reading your sports articles. I have to try some of your fiction.
Everything I've gotten to do in my life is because people thought I wrote a good sports column. But writing a column is great preparation for writing fiction, because the columns have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're using quotes. You go into the locker room. You use quotes to drive your story, and you better grab everybody's attention in the first paragraph, or there's no point in what's going to come afterwards. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned working with Jim, it's that, first of all, you better be telling a good story, and you better keep moving it along. One of the big things he talks about is movie moments, and it's been really fun to reimagine what I'm trying to do, and you got to give head fakes. You got to, when I'm working on a book with Jim, okay, and we're kicking things back and forth. My favorite thing is when I've been able to surprise him. That's when I get to do that. That's a good day.
I think the other thing about the sports writing is when you're a sports writer, a lot of novelists are a little lazy. You're a sports writer, you got to chop wood, because that column is going to be in the paper 3 or 4 times a week. And if you don't do it, there's a blank space in the paper. That doesn't work. So, so Mike is used to what I'm used to for different reasons. We get out and we chop wood every morning. That's the deal.
Jim, I never had a sports editor who I could call up and say, I'm just not feeling it today. And then they'd say, no. That's not how this works.
Don't worry about it, Mike.
We have the space. We'll
run more box scores. Don't worry.
Yeah, we're counting on you today to get people to come to this part of the paper.
So next question comes from Lisa, and feel free to both answer this question. What is your advice for those who are trying to break into the publishing world?
Jim, you go.
It's story. You want to have some, ideally it should be a story where you tell it to somebody in a couple of sentences and they're already interested. That helps for whatever reason. And that'll make it easier, because when it gets to the publisher, they're going to be going like, okay, we got to go out to whatever, Barnes and Noble and Amazon and the independents and the libraries. And we're going to need to tell them in a couple of sentences, why read this book? So that's helpful. That's a thought.
When it's funny, but I believe, and I have always believed, and I spend an awful lot of time writing books for young readers. And I tell them all the time that if you're good, I believe the people will find you. If you have talent, if you have ambition, if you have the ability to tell a good story, Jim, I don't know how you feel about this. I like to think that there's no great undiscovered great talents out there. That I believe that if you're talented enough, people will find their way to your work eventually.
I don't know about that in this day and age. I think there are a lot of talented people that never, like my first book, 31 publishers turned it down, and then it won an Edgar as best first mystery. So go figure that one out. And I think that happens. And sometimes, I was lucky because eventually I did get it published and then it won an award, but that doesn't always happen. And sometimes that breaks the back of the writer and they don't come back. So I think that happens too.
My first novel, I think Esther finally was turned down by 14 publishers, 14. And it ended up becoming a novel that I didn't win, but I got nominated for Edgar for best first novel. And Jim, there was this one letter, and I won't mention the guy's name because he's still alive. It doesn't matter.
Let's get him. Let's get him.
No. But it was like the meanest letter, and no, he'd say a mean thing, and then he'd say, I can't go on. And then he'd say, I must go on. And then like the next paragraph would be way meaner than the one before. And by the you feel like Joe Frazier at the end of the Thriller in Manila. By the end,
okay. We're going to get this schmuck at some point. Okay. All right. We're going to at least use his name in a book. He's going down. All right.
I'll ask a few more audience questions, and then we can have Mike grill James. So an anonymous attendee, and I know you both write YA, an anonymous attendee has a question for Mike. Do you prefer your YA writing to the Parker series or vice versa? Your YA work has been so wonderful and was incredibly important as my children were growing up. Well done, and with my appreciation.
I love them both. I just, it's Bill Goldman used to say to me, all I ever wanted to do was tell my stories. Okay. Whether I'm writing YA books, whether I'm writing middle grade books, whether I'm writing the Parker mysteries, whether I'm writing with Jim, it's like he says, story. Well, you sit down in the morning. My friend Joe Ide was asked about writer's block one time. And he said, writer's block means you got up from your desk. Okay, that's his philosophy about that. I was at a graduation party the other night at my daughter's, the house that my daughter shared with her roommates. And this young man, a brother of one of her roommates, came up and he said, you probably get tired of hearing this, but I only started reading books because of Heat and Travel Team. And I said, no, as a matter of fact, I never get tired of hearing that. And those, a lot of the kids that I ran into last weekend at Boston College, the boys especially, they're the right age. Okay, they came along with Travel Team. They came along with Heat and $1 Million Throw. And the coolest thing I've ever heard, and I'm sure Jim has heard the same thing with just his YA books, is, when you hear from a mom, or he or she never wanted to read until these books came along. And right, Jim? I mean, it's the coolest thing.
I've had literally hundreds of people come up to me and they get tears in their eyes. You got my kid or my kids reading. And, if that's not happening in a lot of families, that's really heartbreaking. And if you can have some part, and my Maximum Ride books in particular, and getting kids reading, it's, people are literally tears in their eyes.
And sometimes, Jim, the parents will say, "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you with this, but he or she didn't want it." And I'll say, "Why would you think you're bothering me? You just paid me the greatest compliment I could ever get as a writer."
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Final audience question for now. Not the greatest question, but it was asked by 3 different people, so I'm gonna satisfy the audience here.
3 strikes, you're out, man.
Yeah, if Tom Selleck makes another Jesse Stone movie, will Mike be involved in the scripting? And Mike, how do you feel Tom Selleck portrays Jesse Stone, the way you perceive him?
It's funny because he made so many. Tom Selleck made, I think, Jim, I think he might have made 10 Jesse Stone TV movies, a lot. Okay, he hasn't made one for a long time, but so he's like indelibly etched in people's imagination. That's how Jesse Stone looks. If there's very little physical description of Jesse in the books, the only one I could find was actually in a Spencer novel where Jesse and Spencer and Hawk intersected, and he's not nearly as big as Tom Selleck is. Spencer described him as being about 6 feet tall and slender, which Tom is not. But it's so funny when people ask you, well, what's this character really look like? And I said, I was talking to Elmore Leonard one time, and I forget what book I was talking about, and I said, what do you imagine? Because he never had much physical description of his main characters. And I said, where do you think he looks like? And he looked at me and said, Mike, he looks like George Clooney. And then he said, and another character, he said, Mike, he looks like Brad Pitt. And all he was thinking about, Clooney played Jack Foley in Out of Sight. It was great. But all he was thinking about is right, Jim? Who's going to play him in the movies?
Yeah.
So I'll leave it there for now for audience questions. And Mike, if you want to
ask
some questions of Jim, go ahead.
I'm actually going to ask serious writing questions. They're not totally serious, okay? But Jim, most people know this by now. Jim comes out of the ad world. J. Walter Thompson, and he was a whiz kid in the ad world. And I'm actually interested, and we talked a little bit about this. When you wrote your first novel, Elmore Leonard was working in the ad business in Detroit, and he used to say he'd write 2 pages early in the morning before he'd let himself have a cup of coffee. So I am interested in, when were you writing that first novel?
I was in advertising, but I've been clean for over 20 years. Say that.
Is there a self-help group that you can go to?
I never considered myself really I always considered myself I wanted to be a writer. So I was always, when I came into advertising, I was writing that first novel, and I used to write it every morning. And when I come home from work, I would write some more. So that was that was what really drove me. And, as I said, I won the Edgar when I was 26, and I had only been in advertising for a couple of years. It took me a long time to actually get a big hit, but
well, that was my next question. What was the one where you went from being
the Alice Cross novels? Yeah.
A
weird thing happened. I was with a woman. I won't get into this, but she died, and it was a heartbreaking thing, and I couldn't write for a couple of years. And then I sat down and I said, okay, what am I good at? What am I not good at? And I realized I was, generally speaking, more comfortable writing first person than third person. And it's actually funny the way the first Cross book happened, because I decided I was really going to sit down to try to use whatever my strengths were and minimize my weaknesses, and write a book that you couldn't put down if I was capable of doing that. And I wrote about a 300-page outline. And Mike knows my outlines are pretty bad anyway. If you can imagine a 300, page outline. And I read it and I said, Jesus, this is the book, essentially. I mean, I fleshed it out a bit, and that's where the short chapters and it's just very tight. But that's where that came from. And my editor at Little Brown, who's really, really good. At the time, Mike Lupica, now he runs Hachette, but I've carried him on my shoulders for, but he said Springsteen, when he did Nebraska, he put a tape down, and it was just with a little guitar stuff, and he carried it around for a few months. And at a certain point he went, that's it. That's the album. That's the CD, whatever it was called back then. And that's kind of what happened with me with the Cross books, especially, Along Came a Spider was the first one.
When I found this out with Horsewoman, because we're going along and you're going along and it's fun and stuff's happening. And I finally called up Jim one day and I said, we got to start wrapping this up. We got to get them to the Olympics. We can't. But it was so liberating for me, because I had never done this before. I'd either written in the third person or the first person. And to go back and forth, I just found out it was a way to really propel stories forward.
Yeah, it's a stylist. I do it in my books. Not all of them. Like a couple are for all first person, or there's a couple are third person. But it's a useful thing. It's a nice trick. Some purists will go, you shouldn't do it. I don't know where some people think that God has come down and handed down these rules. I don't really buy that, and whatever.
No, the greatest rule of writing was the one you alluded to before with Elmore Leonard. I leave out the parts that readers tend to skip. And he also said, never start a book with weather. That was another one.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good thing. Yeah, it was dark and stormy night. Yes, who cares? Or a lot of description. I don't, whatever. When people go on the first page and everything about this town and the hills and whatever the hell, and I'm already gone.
When I just want to ask you one more Alex Cross question, because he became, you and he are aligned now forever. When you started writing Alex Cross, did you have any idea that the whole family? I'm trying to remember was the family this well defined in the early Alex Crosses with the grandmother, and were they all?
Yes, it was all in Along Came. Well, except the kids were younger,
right.
And all the kids weren't born yet, and when it started. So, but yeah, no, Nana, Mama, and the kids were right in there, and it always was. A part of the Alex Cross thing has always been this combination of he's got this tough job, like a lot of us. I mean, his is tougher in a lot of ways, because especially in terms of the insanity of these books, and then mixing it up with the family life. So, and I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people can identify with it. Same with the Michael Bennett novels. He has a job. It's a difficult job. It's a hair-raising job, and he has a life. And so we can all identify with that on some level. He has
a life. He has what? 10. He has 10.
Well, Michael Bennett has. Yeah, he has no life because he has 10 kids.
But
I love the stuff like that. People go like, "What? Yeah, no, it could anything can happen. It's not going to happen 1,000 times." And the more crazy it is, the more interesting it is to me. Like a cop who has 10 kids and Michael Bennett, that's insane. Okay, let's write that, because that's cool, because nobody's done it before, because it's too crazy.
The thing I love about writing Sunny Randall is even though she drives the story, it's only her voice. It's an ensemble piece. I mean, it's Spike. Her father I love her father, who's kind of a playful ex-Boston cop, and Jesse and Richie. And the one thing I loved about this one was finally putting Jesse and Richie Burke in the same room, because I had been kind of leading up to that, and I just wanted to see what if it would be spontaneous combustion when they finally.
And that's always great when, as a reader, you're sitting there going like, "Well, Richie, why didn't you stay with Richie? Oh, but Jesse, that's fun. People like that." And
Susan Silverman, because as you know, Jim, you know what a deep thinker I am. I mean, I'm not. There's a lot of layers to me, right?
What? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure, Mike. Yeah.
Sure. And so the byplay.
I mean, I'll say, can you just repeat it again? Because I got to think this. Yeah. Right.
No, but I think like a therapist when I've got Sunny in the room with Spencer's lady friend, Susan Silverman, and those scenes are really fun to write because it's almost like a cat and mouse game where it's almost like a turf war in her therapist's office for an hour.
Well, I think like a therapist when you call me, and that's why I send you those bills. What, is that wrong? I think it's accurate.
Well, I'm quite happy that you like Sunny, and I think you and my editor Sarah will not have to go to couples counseling, because I think I've explained to you how lucky I am to have Sarah as my editor.
Yeah, look, we can agree to disagree, Sarah and I.
No, stop. Robert, you may have to mediate now, because I just think he doesn't mean, he's just being, you know what? He's just being Patterson. That's what he's
I think I warned Taylor that, it was going to be a tough night. And as Taylor said, it's 35 years, Mike. It's a long, long haul.
Oh, we're not
going there. I mean,
I'll tell you a sports story about Taylor Lupica, the former Taylor McKelvey. A long time ago,
Taylor is his wife.
I wrote Bill Parcells' autobiography. I wrote 2 autobiographies early in my career, one for Reggie Jackson and one with Bill Parcells. And not long after Taylor and I got married, we had dinner with Bill. Bill lives in Jupiter, Florida, and we were in Jupiter at the time. And we went to dinner one night, and we had a lovely time. The next morning, Parcells calls. And I think he's, going to say what a nice evening he had. This was the entire conversation. You over-married. And he hung up. That was it.
Mike and I have both over-married.
Yeah, no. The great thing is our wives actually get along, and it's almost like they knew each other from the moment we sat down to our first dinner, like they were in the same support group.
They commiserate.
Yes.
All right, so I think we're good. Buy Payback, buy Horsewomen in January, and go to the library and be good people. But yeah, go to the library a lot. That's an excellent thing to do.
Yeah, well,
Robert, you don't think we've
in the Wellesley bookstore? Yeah.
We haven't run off any of the fine people at the libraries. We've behaved reasonably well, have we not, Robert?
No, this is great. This has been PG. This is wonderful. No, you guys both did a wonderful job as expected. As somebody said in the comments, you guys should have your own comedy show. But really enjoyed it, and I'm supposed to say a couple of words here. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for this wonderful hour. You're going to look for an email from me tomorrow morning with information on how to purchase an autographed copy of Payback, as well as a link to a feedback survey.
What do you mean how to do it? You go into the bookstore and you buy it.
Well, that's true. Bookstores are open now. That's a good point.
They want people to go visit. Is the stores open, right?
The stores are open, as far as I know.
Okay.
Wellesley's a little bit of a drive, but I do believe they're open.
All right.
Wellesley Books is one of the great independent bookstores in America.
Absolutely.
That is correct. I want to thank Mike and James for everything tonight. I want to compliment them on their hats. And again, want to thank the 14 other libraries, want to thank Wellesley Books, and want to thank Katie. So any last words, gentlemen, before we wrap up?
I just want to say that I am having such a blast working with this man. And when Patterson thinks you don't suck, it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, we're having fun. It's good. We're lucky. Look, if somebody said you're lucky if you find something you like to do, and then it's a miracle if somebody will pay you to do it. So that's our gig. Thank
Excellent.
you. Good night. Good night. Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
James.
night, everybody.
Mike. Everyone have a
Bye.
great night.
Thanks, Robert. Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you, Mike.
Robert.
It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor.